Overtime with Joe Parker provides a comprehensive look into high school sports in North Atlanta. Tune in each week for prep sports headlines and in-depth discussions with local players and coaches.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Overtime with Joe Parker. We have a special guest here today to talk about a few different things, mostly centered around football, and it is a state champion, and that is Milton Kicker Hayden Hairston. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, Hayden, want to jump into a few things today. I'll start with, I believe it was back in April, you made your commitment to the collegiate level. Can you talk or speak to that for our listeners?
Sure. So back in April, I took a visit up to Carnegie Mellon, which is up in Pittsburgh, for everyone who doesn't know. And I'd been talking to them for a couple of months starting in about November, and I took my visit up there, and I just loved it. It was a great atmosphere. All the coaches were great. All the players were great. I got to take my overnight. And everything just felt great. I loved it. It just felt like the place I was supposed to be. And so when I came back, I decided to commit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've heard that from quite a few commits that once they find a place that kind of feels like home,
Right.
It feels like they belong there. So it sounds like you definitely just felt that was the right choice.
Sure. And I'd taken a couple of visits before, but this one just felt different. Like as soon as I stepped on campus, it just felt like it was meant to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, as mentioned, you were the kicker with Milton High School for the last few seasons, and obviously you're heading into the collegiate level with a state championship under your belt. But I know it wasn't quite the easiest journey, say maybe to that point. I know you had an injury. I have talked with Dr. Tim Schrader. He's the medical director of the HIP program at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And he kind of talked about your recovery beginning, I guess it was about 8th grade?
7th and 8th grade.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Again, you talk a little bit about kind of where that, how that injury started and the beginning of your recovery.
Sure. So the first injury, that was going into the 8th grade. And so it was a hip avulsion fracture. So essentially my muscles were stronger than my bones at that point, and I was going through a growth spurt. So my growth plates were open, and it just ripped a little piece of the pelvis off. But so that happened going into the 7th grade. And at first, I had no idea what it was. You feel a pop, and it was just kind of crazy when I went there. Like, you broke your hip. Most of the time you think of someone breaking their hip, they're like 80 years old. So it was kind of strange. So I was in shock, and that was really tough. I was kind of coming up in my career as far as kicking goes. So I was able to fully recover though, and everything went okay after that. But it was really tough, and it was challenging physically and mentally. But thanks to the awesome program over at Children's Healthcare and through their active recovery, I was able to fully recover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, Dr. Schrader did send over a note that this is kind of a fairly common in pre-adolescence and early teenage, particularly if they participate in activities such as running, kicking, hurdling, that kind of thing. So I understand at that point in middle school, you were already kicking.
Correct.
Is that correct?
So I actually started kicking in the 2nd grade. So that actually started out because, I played AYFA all the way up. And in Little League, it was 2 points if you can make it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I also played soccer at the time. So having a big leg, I was like, I probably do that. So that's how it started. But at that point, I was actually participated in a lot of the All-Star games, Future Stars games, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So I was coming up in my career at that point.
Yeah, and based on what Dr. Schrader said, it sounded like you already had a lot of distance there, even in middle school.
I did. So I'm trying to think way back, 7th and 8th grade, I knew I was hitting about 45. So I think 50 was right there at that point in 8th grade too. So
yeah, very impressive at the middle school level. Yeah, well, with that in talking with Dr. Schrader, it sounds like there was kind of multiple, multiple injuries. Were they all that anterior? I'm gonna say the layman's terms of hip problems.
Yeah, I think it's like anterior iliac avulsion fracture. I think that's what it's called. But,
yes.
And so, it was actually the same spot there several times. And And then later on, I guess this was sophomore year, I also tore my quad, but it wasn't like a major thing. It just was another setback. But I was able to overcome it. So it was obviously no one would want that to happen, but it obviously helped me develop mentally as strength wise. Being able to overcome that injury helped me to where I am today.
Yeah, absolutely. And at any point where I mean, I imagine you had that passion for football, obviously.
Right.
So was it a little bit disheartening to have this happen?
It was really challenging, at the time you're like, oh man, this is terrible, but I was able to continue fighting, and as I continued to get better and better, my spirits came up with it. So
Yeah. And, Dr. Shader said one of the biggest things was you avoided surgery and just did it basically rest and recovery. And or obviously with the results, I have to imagine that you're happy with the outcome
right.
of that.
Yeah, I'm glad we went with no surgery option. I think it was the best choice at the time. So it was just more of a natural recovery. I was on crutches and that kind of stuff, but through that and through rehab, it was the right choice.
Well, it absolutely paid off. You began, I guess, with Milton. Was it your junior year that you began, I guess, starting for them?
Right. So junior year was the first year I started as the varsity kicker,
Mhm.
and I'd been with them for all 4 years of high school.
Yeah, very good. Well, obviously, kicking it's kind of one of those outlier positions in sports, maybe like a goalie in hockey or something like that. There's tons of pressure. How did you kind of approach kicking when, let's face it, as a kicker, you're almost expected to, make the kicks, whereas nobody expects a quarterback to throw a perfect pass every time. So, how would you comment on kind of maybe the pressures and the internal thinking
Sure.
game of being a kicker?
So yeah, kickers are definitely different than most positions in football. With kicking, you get one chance versus, somebody like a quarterback, they get, tens of chances during a game. But it definitely is a lot of pressure. But honestly, I thrived under the pressure. I was able to zone everything out and just focus in on the moment. And when those, big pressure kicks came down to it, I was able to deliver most of the time. So it's different, but I think when you can just focus in and block everything out, it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, and with that, you've definitely had success. I know, going through this 2018 season or through your junior and senior season, I think you were at something like 80 for 84 on field or PATs, 13 for 20 on field goals. Do you feel that you're playing up to the level that you wanted to these last 2 years?
So I think I had a really good year these past couple of years. Honestly, there's always room for improvement, and so that's one of the things as a kicker, you're always striving to get better no matter what. So I'm excited to see what's coming up in the future. I think I can heighten my level of play even more. So
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about that 2018 season. You guys, obviously win Milton's not only state championship, but Milton's first state title in so many years. What was, I guess now that you've had, about 6 or 8 months now to look back on that season, what really sticks out for you?
So when I think back at the 2018 season now, it's kind of surreal to think we are state champions. That didn't quite settle in for a while, but now that it's settled in, I reminisce about the season. I think some of the things that stuck out to me the most was just the atmosphere of the team. The team culture was just top level. We really were, Coach Clack liked to emphasize things like band of brothers, and it really was a band of brothers. It wasn't just the saying. We were able to all come together, and in those tough times throughout the season, in the playoffs or even in the regular season, we were able to fight back. And so I think that the fact that we never gave up and the fact that we continued to fight on, I think that was the reason we came out on top.
And again, looking back through that season, you had some big performances. I think you were 3 for 3 field goals against Alpharetta. That ended up being a 10-point game.
Right.
PATs in what was it, Hillgrove 20-19 game. Let's see, there was another, but
and then the state championship game,
yes,
14-13,
the one that probably should have come to mind first. Right. Yeah. So look, was there any game in particular that kind of stood out for you as far as your
Sure.
personal
So
performance?
probably one of my favorite games, like you mentioned, was probably the Alpharetta game. So that was a really cool game. I had 3 field goals in the first half, and I think the halftime score that was 16-14, and so we had one touchdown, I think it was, and so those 3 field goals were able to put us on top. And when we were to go into halftime with the lead, I think that just helped everyone get through, and we ended up, I think, scoring another couple times during the second half, and we won that game. But that was one of my favorite games for sure. You know, the atmosphere, everyone. It's a big rivalry game, and so you had all the fans screaming and everything, and that was probably one of my favorite games of the season.
Hmm. And when you get into those close games as a kicker, you talked about kind of zoning out, but are you thinking, if we're down late, I might get called upon, or if you're leading late, is it even more nerve-wracking being on the sidelines and just having to watch the defense and hope they make that stop?
Sure. So as a kicker, you always have to be ready for these situations during the game, and during times when it came down to a big pressure kick, or if there was a chance there was going to be a kick, I was always ready. And so being ready, you have to prepare. Of course, you take your practice kicks over in the nets, but another big part of it is being mentally ready. You know, when the game gets exciting and it's a lot of pressure, you just have to stay calm. And, ultimately it's just another kick. So,
Mhm.
you just got to think of it if you're out there on the field alone and just practicing. So, you know,
Mhm.
that's what I used.
Yeah. And do you have is having a relationship with your center and your holder important as well, to know that you guys are going to be on the same page?
Absolutely. So that's one of the biggest, most important things, I think. You have to be in tune. It's a unit. It's if you miss or make a kick, everyone looks at the kicker, but ultimately it all comes down to the kick and the snap and the hold and the blocking too with the line. So we had a lot of practice this past season, and we had a good relationship. So I think that's also important to the success.
Hmm. Yeah. And uh, when you kind of look to these last 2 seasons, what mark do you maybe hope that you left on the Milton program?
Um, Thinking about that, um,
I know it's a tough
yeah,
one.
um, I just hope I left a lasting impact as far as being a leader almost. So you can kind of demonstrate the other guys, how to stay calm in those intense moments. Like I mentioned with being a kicker, everyone likes to start pointing fingers or doing whatever when something happens during a game. But I just hope that I could leave an impact that would help others by setting an example on, how to act during those pressure situations, and ultimately just having good character. I think that was one of the things I hope I left an impact with.
Hmm. Yeah. And looking ahead now, going to the collegiate level, what are your hopes or your aspirations, both academically and athletically?
Sure. So one of the reasons I picked Carnegie Mellon was because of the awesome academics they have there. They're very prestigious. So I think I'll be majoring in business, so that'll be a good atmosphere to be around. I hope to learn a lot, and I think I will. But as far as athletics go with football, um, I hope to go up there and have a similar impact I had down here at Milton. Think we'll have a lot of success up there, and just building all those relationships. That's one of the most fun things in football, in my opinion, is just being around all the guys and being friends. You'll be friends with these guys for the rest of your life. So I think going up there and winning some games too, maybe making a few key kicks, that'll be a good time.
Yeah, yeah, very good. And have you kind of started a relationship with your coaches?
Sure. So I've had a good relationship with my recruiter. His name's Coach Andy Holmes, and the head coach, Coach Lackner. We started talking a lot, and I think we have a pretty good relationship. So going into this fall, it'll be good to have that further develop, and we'll see what happens.
Hmm. And with the business degree, is there any particular field you want to enter, or
Sure.
anything that you want to do in
Mhm.
particular?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about majoring in finance specifically. So I think I want to end up doing wealth management one day. I have some family members, my Aunt Kelly and Uncle Rod. So I think I'd want to do that one day, but we'll see. It's just what I have an idea of right now. So I'll do some internships and that kind of thing, and we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. We certainly look forward to seeing you compete up there. And thank you so much for joining us today on the show. I do very much appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely. And thank you all for tuning in to Overtime. For sports coverage in North Fulton and Forsyth County, be sure to follow me on Twitter at Joe Parker GA. And for and I'm going to start that over. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And be sure to follow me for sports coverage of North Fulton and Forsyth County at Joe Parker GA on Twitter. And be sure to follow the show at OT with Joe Parker for updates with each new episode that comes out. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to Overtime with Joe Parker. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show, and follow all of Appen Media's sports coverage at northfulton.com.